Firstly, thank you very much for joining us today, Andy. This is going to be a little session that we've arranged with our friends over at iSport Connect. The topic of conversations, something that we all know and love, well, at least you love more and know more, which is the world of esports. And obviously with regards to our audiences, very much around understanding your personal development in this area, because it's relatively new for you. It's been around for a good many years, obviously, esports. So this is a great chance for us to really hear from someone who's obviously got a very new position, a new title, actually, General Counsel inside the business. And obviously a great chance to learn a little bit about you and your experiences and what you've seen so far. So firstly, Andy, thank you very much for joining us today on this very sunny day. Obviously, in our new way of working, of a video conference, I guess you're getting pretty used to this by now, right?
Yes, I think we're all a little bit more used to video conferencing than perhaps we used to be. By talking with some of my former colleagues in the Middle East who are not used necessarily to working from home very often, it's been a really interesting transition for them. Yeah. I know also for a lot of lawyers who are not always used to working from home or remotely in private practice. And secretly, I'm quite enjoying the experience of working from home more regularly.
Yeah. It's no secret now, I'm afraid. Well, listen, obviously, you just mentioned there, you are a lawyer, a recovering lawyer, I think is the way you once described yourself. And we first met actually in Dubai, it must have been about 3 years ago, I think, at the just around the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. And we came to the offices when you were working with Flash. And of course, Formula One and all major events pretty much for the region were pretty much organized and orchestrated by Flash, right? So I guess swapping the sand dunes for the sunny city life, I suppose, one way of describing it. How have you found that transition from there to Fnatic? I mean, how's that worked out?
So I worked in private practice for the very large international firm now, Norton Rose, for basically the noughties, if you like, and then for the decade that followed was at Flash, and building a team there from scratch, going from just me as a legal counsel all the way up to a team and lots of awards and lots of capacity and a sort of like a workflow that had been really well built out and was really ticking along by the time we finished. So that period that you mentioned immediately prior to me leaving covered, I mean, if I think about, let's say, mid-November to mid-February 18 to 19, we did events as diverse as, Dave Chappelle came and did a show. We did the Abu Dhabi F1 entertainment program. We did the FIFA Club World Cup UAE 2018. We did the AFC Asian Cup UAE 2019, which is a 1.2 million ticket 24-team 51 match international football tournament. We did a papal visit on the 5th of February when the Pope came to visit the UAE. All the logistics and ops work for that. With a team of 3, with no external spend. We did all the paperwork for all those things. And that was very hard work, certainly, but it was possible. So sort of there were no worlds left to conquer, if you like, and was looking for another build opportunity. Fnatic popped up. Was already very excited about esports because I had also, in addition to my legal role at Flash, done a head of strategy, or was the head of strategy. So we've been looking at ways to which to diversify our sort of the types of events that we did, and we were trying to get our heads around esports at that stage because as a promoter, the ecosystem is an interesting one.
What do you feel with those types of experiences are sort of making this transition to somewhere as different, I guess, as esports?
Both Flash's work, so music and sport and cultural events, and esports generally are pretty unregulated industries as a whole. So there's the politics there of the ecosystem, of course, and that requires some careful navigation. But your wider stakeholder group, if you like, is fans and sponsors and the employees of the business and your investors and so on. So those are kind of, managing those groups is relatively common. I think sport in particular is now much more of those 3, so esports, sports, and music. sport in particular, I think, is probably the most structured, certainly at the top tier level. Let's say FIFA in 2010, when Flash had done the FIFA Club World Cup in the UAE, and FIFA in 17-18, in terms of wanting to actually actively audit risk management or risk controls, looking at insurance, not just as a way to have a recourse in the event that the LOC, the organising committee locally, had fallen over, but really to understand whether or not that coverage was effective. I think what esports has done, and I suppose really what the conversation is about here, is what's it learning, and how are we transferring that kind of stuff across. And I would say from a production and fan entertainment standpoint, it's definitely picked a lot from those learnings of music.
An interesting angle just from the point of view of how sponsors behave and how, because they don't really understand esports, they're looking for frames of reference. The frames of reference are often the same that they've applied to their football sponsorship. There is the apparel deal. We get this many LEDs. We get this much engagement from the player. We get one player a month. Do a little piece. We get half an hour with the manager, and then we move on to the next bit. When they're looking at esports, they are, in my experience, and again the kind of conversations that we've been seeing and having with a number of them, is that they look at these audience figures. They look at the level of engagement on platforms such as Twitch and Stream and so on. And they think, well, I want a piece of that, but I don't want to commit a huge amount of my budget because I'm still not quite sure whether that guy or girl really fits with my brand or whether or not that team or that league necessarily sort of engages. So it's quite tentative. And I think that esports has found it harder to gain that kind of traction because there aren't, in my view anyway, I don't think there's enough people that can bring in the level of insight to give people enough confidence to part with larger checks, basically.
Those individuals, and I know this was absolutely not the sort of the tone of what it was that you were saying there, but esports has been around for a long time, and the people that are leading in the industry now are commonly ex-gamers, right? So they have built this wonderful industry, and the degree of fan engagement. If I think about the kind of engagement that we commonly get on our social posts and the number of fans that we have on social media, even in inverted commas, massive brands would absolutely chop an arm off for, because we are native to the community, we're native to digital, and so it's just there, like the fan expectation, the community engagement, all these things that are having to be built by big brands now during this time of lockdown, we just had from day one, because it comes out of that community. Like fundamentally, we are a fan-driven brand, but also I think just the scale of everyone's expectation. You can't, if you're doing deals with very large sponsors, which Fnatic is, they also have their own expectations with regards to how you're going to manage those kind of risks and what kind of comfort they can take aligning their brand with yours. So I think having the confidence to come in and say, okay, this is how this should be structured, this is how you should be doing it, but also the humbleness to again say, well, okay, what are we going to learn about it? What can esports teach us about how to structure these things in a way which is authentically esports, which is actually going to work? I think that's really the key to it all. What I am doing here though is I think working in the background to try and protect the value that's being generated by those kind of things. I'd say a large amount of my day is there trying to think about ways in which things could go wrong and ensuring that if those things do go wrong, that Fnatic is protected.
The current circumstances that we find ourselves in has clearly showed us that a businesses need to be robust, they need to be agile. Do you see it as a balance? Do you think is it more one or the other? Do you need to be more agile in the kind of in the kind of the nature of your business, or is it more about being robust as a business unit to be able to withstand and weather these types of events?
Right, you want to be robust as the start point, and once you get to a certain level of robustness, then you can start to be agile. We've seen in Counter-Strike, for example, whole new tournament, sort of branded tournaments organized and come up and come down and so on. All that is happening all the time, and we now have a new game coming into the ecosystem, which is Valorant, the Riot title. A League of Legends community looking for a first-person shooter potentially that sort of meets their sort of aesthetic requirements for a game. So they're all leaping into that. You've got streamers from other games now switching into that. So again, as an organization, we have to be able to be sufficiently agile to cover that. If you've got technical people, they very often are tough and non-empathetic managers. So you've got the outsider aesthetic, you've got the kind of tech overlay, and then you've just got the number of years in which these companies have been working within a space whereby it was important how they brought and developed talent on, rather than as in they had a sufficiently long enough horizon of kind of strategy to be able to say, if I have this person now, that's going to be a future manager or a future departmental head, or maybe even a future CEO. How do I offer that person a career path? Because the idea of a career path in esports is also a pretty novel thing.
I mean, what do you see as your challenge? Obviously, within the current circumstances, is a hell of a challenge in itself. But what do you see as the main challenge for you, particularly inside Fnatic and perhaps in the broader esports space? But I mean, firstly, within Fnatic,
to move from a world where almost nothing is possible to a world where, in fact, it's the opposite of that. It's DIY. It's creative. It's, you know, it has all these wonderful influences on it. It's just that's very beneficial to someone who's trying to create this kind of change. And again, if it also leads itself to an idea of kind of trying to take the best of your experience and merge it with that enthusiasm and that authenticity and that sort of tech overlay into something which is even better for where you end up. I think one of the things that, you know, this coronavirus period has taught us a lot about risk management, not just because some of the risks that we anticipated for the business would have a major impact. Mainly, for example, all of our physical facilities being shut, all of the players being unable to attend events offline, has not been as impactful as we thought it would be necessarily. In fact, actually, you know, the ecosystem has responded incredibly well to that happening. It's been a advantage, of course, that traditional sports have been shut down at the same time, and so there's a gap between, you know, this huge demand that people now have because they're at home, they're looking for things to watch and things to get involved with, versus this dwindling supply of content. Esports was just ready to jump into that gap. I think skateboarding is a good parallel to esports. It's something which is fundamentally community driven. It has an outsider aesthetic. So people who enjoyed, and again, broad terms, and apologies to anybody who is a very straight-laced skateboarder, but very many skateboarders are into skateboarding because it's not football or, you know, let's say a sport that lots of people are into. They like it because it is an outsider thing.
Are you a lifestyle organization? Are you an esports type of organization? I mean, when you look at yourself, because obviously there's a little bit of everything in there, I know, but can you be one on the other, or maybe both? I don't know.
We're running three very complicated businesses. We're running a sports team, we're running an apparel outlet, and we're also sort of D2C apparel and also a hardware manufacturer. And there are huge companies competing in those spaces very aggressively, and we are competing with them all. Yes, we see ourselves very much as a brand, and I think to understand why you get to brand and not sports team, I think it's probably important to understand where esports sits in the ecosystem and how important it is that it's natively digital. How our talent talks to our fans is just fundamentally different to how, I don't know, Cristiano Ronaldo, picking somebody with a massive social media following, talks with his fans, because this is Cristiano Ronaldo getting on a private jet and putting a picture of himself on Instagram, which is aspirational, but the fan engagement is completely asymmetric. Esports is, and where it's positioned, is so much bigger than just like for like content with traditional sports. That is not even the tip of the iceberg in terms of where esports sits culturally and how important it is to young people.
I use my son as example, age 10, he'd be much rather, I think, for him to spend, you know, an hour plus with his dad watching a football match or a rugby match would be a hard ask. For him to spend 2+ hours on Fortnite with his mates engaged, not a problem.
Within esports, so often when we engage as a community, what you realize is how big and how enthusiastic the community is, but it can be sort of like slightly hidden away sometimes. It's not like football where it's possible for you to express your fandom, you know, regularly through what it is that you watch, and let's say, you know, you go to the pub and you watch it, right? And there's all that sort of stuff. It's just part of our national life in a way that esports currently isn't, but I'm sure will be eventually. Again, it's a little bit like streaming for music. So, you know, when that started off, fundamentally, you know, you had these LimeWires and Napsters and all these kind of things where you go and get that streaming. It took Apple to pull together the hardware solution and the software solution and the payment solution in a way which clicked. We needed all that stuff to happen for the idea of in-game items and microtransactions to even be possible, right? So the idea that you would buy something digital online, not own it, right? You know, you would be borrowing it until, you know, either you no longer own the game or you breach the terms of the user license and they take it off you. All those things needed to be there. But also we've trained a generation of people to expect to buy things in small chunks at a low price, right? So I really like that song and I want to have it, so I'll pay 79p for it. But I won't buy the whole album, £15. And it definitely won't be the idea of me, you know, going down to Middlesbrough town centre as a 15-year-old with pocket money and buying an album and taking it home and listening to it. That whole idea just needs to get junked for this to happen. The microtransactions piece, which is critically important to the future of esports, digital and in-game items are really, really important in terms of how this all gets monetized. There's no doubt about that. But the expectation is that will also be provided for free now. So, for example, we're doing skins for Animal Crossing characters, and that is a fan community-driven piece. But we're not charging for those skins at the moment because they're out there and people are creating them, and it becomes a fan and a brand engagement piece, and that's wonderful. And again, for brands, be able to explain, look, you're going to license us your brand and we're going to put it on the front of a jersey, but you have to understand that fan art and digital products people will create using that sort of stuff, because you're now, if you come at this authentically, you're now part of our community, and people will sort of do things with your products which you would not have, or not your product, with your brand, that you might not have necessarily approved, but will be wonderful for your brand. If you're putting your brand out there and people are doing cool things with it on social platforms, you know, they're doing that with your brand for nothing, and they are acting as ambassadors for it. It's putting in all the spaces that you'd want it to go into. If you have that longer term brand horizon, how amazing for a brand. I mean, brands pay for this kind of stuff all the time, you know. So I think that kind of moving to a digital engagement, that's where the risk lies, but it's also that tremendous opportunity.
Yeah, and I think the single biggest thing there is trust. I mean, if I'm a brand and I'm trusting, you know, fans with my brand, that takes a certain level of balls. And I think that those are the sort of, you know, these are the kind of opportunities that are either there for the brave. But again, going back to what we said right at the start, which is, you know, why is it that people are prepared to take a risk on something like this, is because of the people element.
The brand visionaries, if you like, need to be able to explain to a brand like that, which is obviously very heavily curated and very carefully managed in terms of value, and really understands the value of its association. So if you're going to, you know, if you are Lamborghini and you want to associate yourself with an esports team, you're going to want to be very confident that they are the right fit, sort of culturally, values-wise, and so on. Let's say the quality of the content is important up to an extent, but if there's no other content available, then fans will understand you've got to do something. So, okay, it's either reruns of the 1990 World Cup or it's kind of this stuff. All right, fine. But if people watch it and they see our brand engage with it and it's not fun, we don't have control over that product, then that's a problem for us. Particularly if you think about how our usual broadcast experiences, which is Twitch, is Fnatic Live, is our people, our streamers, our players, our influencers, content which comes up from our community because of our passionate kind of core group of people who understand and speak to this community. They're scheduling it, they're making it, we're supporting it, you know, and you have this wonderful sense of engagement and DIY aesthetic with it. That's much more important for us than just the idea of associating with your brand. What is it that you're trying to achieve? You talked about goals. Remember, what is it that you're trying to actually achieve out of this? Well, why are you coming to Fnatic? If you're coming because you just want to get into esports, well, then we'll help you understand whether or not this is the right association for you. If you're coming because you want to do that brand piece and jump into this world, then again, maybe you're going to have to, as all great brand partnerships come together in this way, maybe some of the things that you think are important in this partnership, we're going to need to dig into and understand how we build that in a way which is most effective. We're not in a physical world anymore. From a brand activation standpoint, it's digital. And yes, you can put those controls on it. And we've definitely seen brands who do that. You know, we would say, for example, we'll create a meme for you. So MVP award, the end of each match, standard meme format. You have the player here, you have your brand here, we have our brand there. Let's just sign it off, and then you don't have to sign it off every time. And we've had brands say, well, do you know what, actually, it's a deployment, so we're going to have to approve that. Okay, so that only works if you can turn around your approval in 20 minutes. Like the game finishes, we're going to email it to you, and you're going to say yes, and we're going to put it out. Like 20 minutes tops. This is not a 72 hours or 21 days, or approval timelines have to be snappier.
We did a lot of work with Tottenham Hotspur for 2 years, I think it was, as a project, helping them with the whole digital content piece around the new stadium. So again, looking at how everything and using technology to enhance the fan day experience. With what we were looking at is actually saying to a potential partner, listen, rather than give us cash, just make sure that you are enhancing our fans' experience, whatever the event is. Commit that budget to investing into experiential, to investing into making that one-to-one connection, if that's the most appropriate thing for the environment, rather than writing us a massive check that we then have to somehow every 5 years, reimagine the ROI against it through various different metrics.
I did the naming rights deals for Do Arena and the Do Forum, which was the first in MENA, and what we were able to do there with that sponsor of the facility was to say, what you're going to offer your consumers that's different as a result of this? How do you use this to reposition your brand to associate with music, for example? What experiences are you going to offer? So their customers were able to get better Wi-Fi signal, they were able to get behind the scenes footage, they were able to qualify to participate in the real high-end customers, had an experience backstage that was kind of unique to them. You're offering opportunities for people, not just to go and do something they couldn't do if they didn't have the association with your brand, but also to effectively help rebrand themselves. Like, I am the kind of person who is backstage at a concert, right? Rather than I am just a regular fan.
Quick fire. I always like my little quick fire questions, Andy. I've got to keep them on the move. What is the best event that you've ever been to in your life?
I want to say 22nd of October 2011. I went to a Metallica show that Flash had put on. It was like, you can have Metallica, but it's got to be Tuesday. All right, fine, wonderful. And a couple of great things about that show. Number one, because it was the first time they played in the Middle East, we had fans coming from all over the place to be able to go to the show, to be able to be part of it. And that's that Stadium Rock experience of all these wonderful things are happening, and you understand now how it all kind of clicks. So I'm very lucky that if you work in something like events, and then you work with these wonderful communities, be it music or sport or esport, the sense of engagement and community and satisfaction from that is really tangible.
So we obviously know your football club is Middlesbrough. What's your go-to game then? If we were to have a quick game online, what would you and I be playing?
So one of the very first games that I loved playing when I was younger was Doom.
Oh, and, Network Doom, awesome. Yep, loved it.
Correct answer.
Amazon or Netflix? Which do you use?
I mean, we're obviously partners with Twitch, and so on that basis, I should probably say Amazon. I'm almost surprised that they haven't done more in sport, and they've done those. So they bought those. They bought a few Premier League games. Obviously, they were available over the Christmas period, and they've done some stuff with the ATP in tennis.
Yeah.
That if you look at how they're monetizing Twitch, that's the future of broadcast engagement more generally. Right, so the Twitch platform allied with Amazon's ability to facilitate microtransactions and fulfill things like merch purchasing through their platform. If you think about how integrated that is, broadcast and shopping go together very naturally. Harry Kane, you talk about Spurs around, Harry Kane jersey now, and you can have it before the match ends, and if he scores, we'll give you 10% off. All those things are possible with that platform.
I've done some work with Amazon. In fact, my first project with them was the All or Nothing series with Man City back in the day.
Right.
And if that experience shows me anything, and obviously more recently, is that they are incredibly data orientated. They are, they have the biggest guns to pull out and start shooting. They just need to work out, where to aim them. But they are a force to be reckoned with. So it'll be quite interesting. Okay. And who's your hero in the world?
The reality is, I don't naturally kind of idolize people. I'd be really concerned almost to sort of say, all right, well, here is somebody who I think has been particularly, I think there's definitely people that have been important in my life, but I wouldn't describe those people as being idols. There's definitely people whose work that I enjoy, and there's people who have probably had an outsized impact on me professionally in terms of people that I've worked with. But no, I'm not putting any posters up on my walls anymore, unfortunately, Dom.
Well, listen, this has been, as always, a fascinating and most enjoyable discourse. I think we've covered many different topics. So if anything tells me anything, if we can cover the Pope, Metallica, esports, and lawyers in the same sort of timescales, and that's pretty impressive in anyone's book. So thank you again for taking the time out to do this with me, and obviously thanks to my friends at Esports Connect who've obviously put together the production part of this. You can buy the Fnatic t-shirts. I'm sure there'll be a special discount if you quote Andy at 10%. But no, seriously, mate, I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much, and we'll hook it up from there.
All right, thanks, Tom.